Welcome back into Mining Stock Daily, everybody. Moving right along, we are going to head down to Mexico with some silver and gold exploration, development, and mining with our friends from Sierra Madre Gold Silver. They do trade on the Venture Exchange with the symbol SM and on the OTCQX with SNDRF. The company has closed its acquisition of the Toro Silver Mine, and we're going to talk about this and everything else lined up for the company with CEO Alex Langer. Alex, congratulations. Welcome back to the pod.
Thanks a bunch, Trevor. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So this acquisition, transformational, I guess one would say, if we're going to throw out the lingo out there, but it really is kind of a game changer for the company. So how does this acquisition change the company's identity or long-term growth strategy?
It's quite a bit, and I guess transformational gets thrown around quite a bit, but it's a good term, especially in this case. So we're going from literally a one-asset company, at least production-ready assets. We have Guitarra, which is producing, and obviously we're increasing throughput there, and that's going really well. But it gives us another production-ready asset. So you diversification of risk. First off, it's also a much bigger plant. The Toro operation ceased in 2020. It was built in 2014, so it's very, very new. It's a 3,000 ton per day operation, again, fully permitted, and it fits really well within the Sierra Madre thematic of, being able to get into production quickly, also really large exploration upside. So we like the ability to generate cash flows and then use those cash flows to explore a much larger area. It's also in elephant country, so the location of the mill and the project Toro is really well situated. It's in the state of Zacatecas. We actually access it through Durango. The city of Durango is about an hour, 45 minutes away, but we're surrounded by Grupo Mexico, by Pan American's La Colorada mine, Piñoles, so some really big players, some really big mines located within the vicinity. So it is in elephant country, especially on the CRD sides, which are the richest kind of silver deposits in Mexico. So the exploration upside there is quite strong. And we have the newest, biggest, brightest mill in the area. So it's really transformational for the company. Lets us get, from my opinion, a small producer, and everything goes well and we get this thing into production and pushing it forward. We'll be in mid-tier with these two projects, which is pretty exciting.
All right. It was once kind of up there with one of Mexico's premier silver mines, now on care and maintenance. But so what gives you the confidence that the company can successfully restart this operation where a larger producer chose to divest it?
Yeah, so it's small. So again, like for a company like First Majestic, whom we bought it from, and by far our largest shareholder, it's, when I was in production, I was producing 2.5 million ounces of silver equivalent. Again, doesn't move the needle for First Majestic. We're doing, a lot more than that with all their operations. So a company like us, where, at La Guitarra, if things go well, we're producing, somewhat close to that. Being able to double that moves us up quite a bit. So it's just really economies of scale of what we have in terms of production profile and getting from a small producer to mid-tier, getting better valuations. So for us, it's huge. And for a company like First Majestic, it really doesn't move the needle. So for us, we're excited to kind of get to that point. But there's a bit of work we need to do before we can, turn on the switches per se.
Okay. Are there any synergies between these two operations, La Guitarra and Toro? How do investors kind of look at this?
Yeah, it's far away. You're about a 10-hour drive. So in terms of moving material from one mine to another or one project, there's not. Now with management and being in Mexico and having our offices down there and our full technical team is Mexico outside of Greg, a lot of synergies there with having know-how in Mexico and being able to operate. Now there's a bunch of extra equipment at Toro. So in terms of the expansion at La Guitarra, I think we'll be able to save a bit of cash there for the time being and moving some of the equipment over. It's big. Like as I mentioned, 3,000 plus tons per day, plus a bunch of extra crushers and ball mills and equipment. So there is some synergies in terms of equipment, but in terms of being able to transfer material from one project to the other, probably not.
Okay, with Toro, what's your priorities as far as to-dos for the next 6 months? for the remainder of the
Yeah,
year,
so
Alex?
it's really getting a handle on everything. And so
Okay.
number one, and it was in the 43101, and the number one thing we need to do is kind of go through the former drill core and information. So we're mapping. We're going to be hiring about 4 geologists, plus about 10 helpers to really get out in the field to remap, relog a bunch of core, and go through a lot of the database. So rework the database that was there, the historic resource of just over right around 18 million ounces of silver equivalent at about 350 grams, so nice high grade. But for us, we want to relog that core, understand where all the drilling happened, reinterpret that database, and get ready for a drill program. So we, the back of the acquisition, we raised a bunch of extra cash, gives us about 30,000 meters of drilling in terms of a phase 1 drilling campaign. So that's a lot. We're not just going to be looking at the mid-sulfidation vein material. That was what First Majestic was mining from, and where those current historic resources are located. We're actually going to be looking at some of the CRD potential, these mantos, chimneys, breccias. So we see a lot of mineralization at surface, as well as the old records. So we want to continue on that. So we're looking at both increasing and updating that resource, as well as looking for discovery of some of this other mineralization that we're quite confident we'll be able to have.
All right, let's talk about the capital allocation. Obviously, the cash flow from La Guitarra, looked nice. Your first quarter financial results showed record revenues. That La Guitarra hasn't been back in production for very long, but it is what it is. But let's talk. The capital allocation with the optimization at La Guitarra, with the continued development work that you just laid out for Del Toro. Give us a sense of how you're balancing that capital allocation from one producing asset.
Sure. So we'll start La Guitarra. Obviously, La Guitarra has been cash flow positive literally since week 1, since we turned it on, which is great. We did raise 19.5 million Canadian about a year ago in July, and that money is for the expansion at La Guitarra, as well as the exploration program that's hopefully going to be starting soon at La Guitarra as well. So gave us about 20,000 meters of drilling, as well as a double expansion going from 500 tons per day to 750, 800, which we're pretty much there or getting there, and then phase 2 expansion getting us up to 12 to 1,500 tons per day. So that capital was allocated from that financing for La Guitarra specifically. Now the extra cash flows we generate, we can use to increase that drill program, which, if things go well, it's something we'd like to do. And then now at Del Toro, after the purchase, after banking fees, legal, all of that, we're sitting at about 20 million plus there, and that's going to be used for Del Toro. So the care and maintenance fees on that are about 2.5 million a year. That's taxes. That's what we have. So we've kind of budgeted, enough time to have that, and then the rest would be kind of drilling, about 12 million in exploration, and then we've left about 10 million just in case we need a few things. So we've kind of internally estimated about 10 million to turn it on. So it'd always be nice to have that money ready and available. Having said that, if drilling goes really well and we want to put that towards drilling, we have the flexibility to do that. And I can raise capital, through perhaps an offtake agreement down the road to, necessitate 10 million to get it back into production. So just a bit of flexibility there. You never want to fall behind. And then of course the cash flows that we're developing at La Guitarra can, go either way as well. So optionality, which I think is pretty important.
Yeah. One of the things you've emphasized in previous discussions, Alex, and I think we see this with the acquisition of Del Toro, is really the priority of buying existing infrastructure rather than building new mines from scratch. And I'm just kind of wondering how this really lends itself in the permitting environment we continue to try to wade through in Mexico. Does it make brownfield acquisitions more attractive than, say, grassroots development now?
Yeah, we're starting to see some permits come through in Mexico, which is a really good sign for the sector. I think they're happening, every few months. For us, when we purchased La Guitarra, for instance, there hadn't been any new permits in a while. It was a previous administration. Things didn't look great. So having a previously permitted project that was ready to go made a lot of sense then. Now, it's easier for us for sure, having it fully permitted. The permitting landscape, as I mentioned, is better in Mexico, but, I agree. If it's already permitted, permitted, ready to go, saves you quite a bit of time and capital and, going through that process. So we're a little bit ahead there. Having said that, things are looking better in Mexico, but it's a case by case basis for sure. And you just have to, look at each case individually and figure out what makes the most sense.
Sure.
But for us, having the comfort that it's already permitted goes a long way for sure.
So you would say that the permitting in Mexico is a little bit more favorable than, say, what the North American investors are perceiving right now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
No, like even if it's drill permits, even if it's, moving, we're seeing things, especially on the brownfield side, we see open pits being delivered. There's a bunch more mines that are kind of further along that I think will be getting their permits relatively soon as well. Obviously it's case by case and has to benefit the community in Mexico, but we're seeing these come through, which is really, really important. Much quicker than what you would have, especially in Canada where I'm based. So that's one good thing about Mexico is it's always been merit based in terms of permitting. So as long as your environmental is good, community engagement, engineering makes sense, permits are available. It might take a little bit of time, whereas in Canada, it can be more politicized depending on the location you're in. So it can take much, much longer. That's one of the good things about Mexico. And, there was rhetoric that, no permits coming in and no open pits. Right. And, these conversations happen. But in practicality, it never did happen in terms of banning open pits.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about the silver market. Would love to kind of pick your brain here where we're at. Obviously, downward trend, and I think nobody's surprised to hear that. But we're a long ways from where we were the last week of January. But one could probably make the case that perhaps we're starting to see some bottoming action in the price itself. But one could also argue that silver fundamentals continue to strengthen, growing industrial demand. Investment demand as well seems to be picking up as well. We're starting to see more people kind of dabble in the silver market after this pullback. So how does owning two producing or near producing silver assets kind of lean itself at the timing of this, Alex? Obviously, you can't control the market, but you can control the optimization of your project. So how do you think this thing lines up?
For sure. When we decided to go to production at La Guitarra, silver went crazy, hit $24, and I thought our timing was good then, so that's what we pushed forward. Pretty lucky to hit the higher prices. It wasn't definitely not within my models or anything we had hoped, but definitely taking full advantage of it. And I think, just seeing the amount of interest in offtake and where it's going and the amount of interest in silver as a commodity for, industrial processes, you mentioned solar panels and EVs and data centers, it's not slowing down at all. So I'm still very, very bullish on silver. And I think we're going to, these downturns in terms of the price, I think are healthy. You need these corrections. It needs to build a base. It needs to move to the next level. For us, we haven't hedged at all. Maybe something down the road we could look at. We do have gold as, byproduct for about 45% of the value right now. So that is, I guess, a built-in hedge. But what it allowed us to do, at least in the last quarter, including this quarter, is we're able to process a lot of material that was outside our known resource area. So about 50% of the material that we were processing, lower grade, but still profitable. And it's because of the higher silver prices, which, allows us to, save some of the higher grade material down the road in case we need it, in case silver does come off. Because as you mentioned, as a producer, it's the one thing I can't quite control is the price of silver, but I can control my costs and when I'm putting through the mill. So it gives us more flexibility down the road. And we definitely took full advantage of the higher silver price as much as we possibly could. And even today, these prices are just excellent. So we're still doing the same thing and generating profitability, which is obviously the number one thing that we're trying to do.
Well, I think that leans into my next and final question, and I think you kind of laid out your answer already. But we've had a lot of conversations in the recent weeks as far as the market continuing to sleep on the margin value of gold producers. Still, even with gold pulling back to $4,000 an ounce, the margins are still incredibly bountiful. In fact, it was about last time we hit $4,000 on the upside, we were screaming that these margins have never been this good, and so we're back here again. They're still good. And, we say the market's sleeping on gold producers, but we haven't had that same conversation with silver producers. I mean, is the market sleeping on silver producers?
Absolutely. So some of the big guys are making so much money. It's amazing, right? Now the market wants to see what they're going to be doing with that capital, and usually what happens is they build these big war chests, and then they're like, oh no, our reserves are getting lower. Oh, who could have imagined? And then they start to buy other projects and things like that. But to find primary silver producers where you get a proper silver valuation, 10 million ounce plus projects are few and far between, around the world. So just a couple more quarters, maybe a little bit of M&A, and then you're going to see again a lot more capital coming into it. And war is never good, uncertainty, things like that. You just also probably put a bit of a cap on it for the time being. But these guys are making a lot of money. They're sitting on their capital. They're probably allocating a little bit for exploration, things like that. But I think a bit of M&A, once that starts to happen, will accelerate and excite the market as it always does. So just a little bit of wait and see.
Okay. All right. Alex, good to see you. Thanks so much. Congratulations on closing this deal. And now the fun work begins with Del Toro. And obviously, I guess maybe you could say even better work with producing cash flow from Guitarra. But it's going to be an exciting final 6 months of 2026 for you and the team. We'll be covering the story along the way with all the updates to come. So appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Trevor. Yeah, I know, always happy to chat. And news will be pretty hot and heavy actually over the summer. I know most companies usually slow down, but we've been pretty quiet. But now with the expansion getting really, really close, we'll have news in terms of throughput increases and, what our plans are on the exploration side. And, as, various pieces of equipment get finalized and are fully operational, we'll share that. So pretty exciting times. Yeah, it's good timing. Awesome.
Very good. Okay. That's your update from Sierra Madre Gold and Silver, everybody. More to come. And I think that's basically a wrap for us today. We'll be back tomorrow with the morning briefing. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, sir.
The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.